Sure,
So I'm
Nick.
a counselor, so focus is social emotional learning. And I appreciate what you've been saying about getting the kids to think about different ways of solving problems and doing that. Um, One of the things that we're in the midst of right now is obviously this pandemic and kids attempting to create some sort of normalcy with all of this. Have you found that some of these methods work better with kids who are under extreme stress or pressure or emotional turmoil than others? Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm communicating clearly
Do you
either.
mean, well, no, I appreciate the question. And I also really appreciate you being a part of today's session. I think that the conversation around social emotional learning and the fact that it's coming out so much during this pandemic is one thing. I'm just so happy to have it become a normal part of the conversation, only because with the brain science part of it, we've known how critical that connection to social awareness, connection to feeling. It's part of the framing of the learning questions, right? And people go, oh, it's about feelings. That one's less important. You're like, no, that was huge. And so people accept me saying that now more often. So if your question is, which of these techniques, right, should we be going after to support children who are on the bubble or experiencing risk, or maybe we're not even sure, right? So my question to you back would be, are we talking about a group of children we've identified and so we want to go after them specifically, or is it, Marie, are we looking for a strategy that we want to push out above all others because any child could be at risk? Like which angle do you want to go?
Specifically, the second one. I think the first one, having those identified needs, is we've already thought about kind of the best way of going about teaching that kid or working with that child. So the second one is one of the things that I've been racking my brain over as far as like how to generally assess the well-being of students, and to continue to make educational growth with everything else that they're experiencing with the change. And I mean, we know that consistency is incredibly important for kids, and every week's different, surprise, you know? So it's been very, very difficult for a lot of children to kind of get along with this stuff. So yeah, I guess as an overall, the second one that you're explaining as an overall urging direction of going down this.
I would say there are three things that off the top of my head, I would start messaging as a connection on this. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go play for a second here. And I appreciate your question very much. I think the first one is this. And when I normally teach this, we talk about the fact that we're all distant, right? So going off of what you're playing in, having faculty think about what offsite learning would require to be accurate and consistent, and start planning that way for all of their instruction. Meaning, don't try to make offsite instruction just like onsite. You're trying to make on-site instruction more like off-site. This way, when children are moving back and forth or every week is different, the nature of how I was preparing, for example, writing all my learning targets and making them student facing, I should be giving that to the kids whether they're on-site or off-site. That should just be a normal thing I'm doing. And so this is a way to create that consistency that you were just talking about. And it's as easy as just, hey, and people would say, well, but that's over planning because I'm in the room and so I don't need to do that. And you're like, yeah, but we're trying to create a pattern, right? And something reliable for kids that they're familiar with. And they're familiar with it when you were both there with them, and also in the event that you're ever not there with them. And so it's really for the kids that we're going to overplan this year. We are seriously going to almost make it as transparent, overplanned, over-engineered. We're going to go all Roman school on this one, right? So we're going to over-engineer the learning experiences so that on-site and off-site can run in a similar way. So that's answer number one. Answer number two, I would totally go after the framing the learning. Gosh, I went right by it. Did you see that happen? Totally. Here it is. Framing the learning. It's 5 basic little questions. Any teacher can do it. Have them connected to reflections, right? And reflection tools, because what you're going after is, what am I learning and why am I learning it, which is going to help promote long-term retention. How am I learning it, which goes after that. Am I aware of my learning strategy, which is something we're going to be talking about. How will I know if I've learned it, so kids can self-assess? But how do I feel about learning it? And so you've created this almost habit of, I'm going after your feelings. And so even if the kids don't answer the first 4, even if they only answer the 5th one, or sometimes maybe I only ask that one, it doesn't stand out as a weird thing where I'm pulling a child aside and going, how are you feeling? Because now I'm showing almost too much concern. But to create it as a part of a natural habit that, oh yeah, I have to talk about this, and I even had to think about that. 1, it's going to improve retention. 2, it's going to open up a line of communication with the kids as a natural habit. So I would go after that as a piece. That's the 2nd. And then the 3rd one I would totally go after is, I would connect it. Oh, I gave a presentation. I don't know if you were there. I did the, I think was it yesterday? I got to tell you, they all swim together for me. So here it is, the accountability. Yeah. So accountability and assessment design. Yeah. I would totally go after reflection. The last part of this, you can fast forward through the whole video, right? But the last part, when I go into reflection, even if the teachers created interactive notebooks or just brought in some more of those reflection levels, especially your introverted students who might have more stress at home.
This is a good one. I've heard, or I was listening to other webinars about this as well. The online notebooks or journals or whatever.
Yep. Go into this, pick any of them. Even surveying the kids as a natural part of the assessment design creates an opportunity for children to communicate with us a little more openly. And these are the same kids that might have trouble raising their hand in class or asking a question when they need help. So they're not going to say it in a live webinar or in a face-to-face like this, right? So you have to create other lines of open communication. But here's what you need to stress to the teachers. Seriously, if you have them write a reflection like this, you've got to give feedback on it. You have to prove that you read it. You have to write them notes back. Draw them pictures, right? You do things like that, and the kids will start to open up. And last but not least, just as a caveat to that, these kids tend to talk on the phone quite well. So I don't mean a video chat. So a video chat shows me them, and I'll learn information by looking at them for sure. But if you really want to get them talking to you, just giving a couple of minute phone call, a phone call where you talk to them. Kids are like, my teacher talked to me, and they act. There's an intimacy to it that's amazing. We can get teachers temporary phone numbers if they don't want to hand out their actual phone numbers. But these kids seem to speak nonstop on the phone. Like once you get them started, it's actually really hard to get them off the phone. It's truly fascinating how much we can get them to talk when we're not looking at their faces, right? So you don't have the intimidation of, you're giving me the scrutiny of your eyes. So letting them speak through a phone, especially if you're looking to get where they are emotionally, that's been a technique we've been using. It's been outstanding, especially with kids you want to get that social emotional information.
Yeah.
How are we doing? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes great sense.
Those are great questions. I think we could do a whole session on that, Tracy, if you'd let me. Well, the impact of the social emotional well-being is,
Marie, as long as you've got the time.
I want to know how you're keeping track also of the social emotional health of your families, like the parents, because your students are under the impact of whatever stresses they're going through. And we have a lot of families in financial crisis right now. We have a lot of families that are unsure about their living arrangements, right? So, so you've got a lot of things going on. So thinking about outreach into the families is something that I would expect to be a conversation, Nick, that might go across your table.
Yeah. Well, it's something that I think historically, like Anne, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you guys have kind of, from your office, you've kind of handled that aspect of like reaching out to the parents, surveying them, getting an idea, but I don't know how in-depth the responses have been.
I think we've just
really scratched the surface in terms of the kind of social emotional part. So we've done lots of feedback loops and surveys, but it's been primarily about the program, how things are going for their kids, you know, kind of on that level. Yeah, I think that, and this came through in our self-study report for our learning principle, that we just need much more, you know, even pandemic or not, we need much more systematic systems of assessing and gathering feedback on this element of our community. You know, how our families, how our kids doing, how do parents see their kids in terms of their social emotional adjustment. So yeah, just at the beginning, hopefully our work with Lee Waters is really going to give us a lot of guidance on that, which we're starting as well. You know, Marie, we're also working with Lee Waters. So yeah, I'd say it's been spotty really at best, although we did what felt like a million surveys. It wasn't really targeting. I would actually say, Nick, the one that you and Jamie put out to the kids at the end of last year was garnered the best data so far. That was actually quite a good start, I thought. But just the beginning.
I'll share with you, if I share my screen again real quick, since we've already got Orange on the table. If you go to Orange's site, sorry, it's oess.org. One of the things I liked about what they did, and this is a very high performing, this is in Connecticut. These are affluent families, high expectations of their school. And notice the first thing that shows up when you go to their website. Social emotional tips and advice. It is in fact, you can't even go to their school website without this giant screen showing up. And the first thing they lead you to is called Peace at Home. And they have free live online parenting classes for supporting parents during COVID. During, like, especially when you have kids at home, support, so interactive live online classes, recorded classes, or flash classes, right? 15 minutes or less. Parents just give us 15 minutes, have a conversation with you about the social emotional awareness of your home and its impact on both you and your children. They have a website, so peaceathomeparenting.com. And then, so let's say I'm like, oh no, this is not what I want to do. So I'm trying to close this as a parent, right? I still come in, and when I come in, they have their resources for learning and the coronavirus update center. And then if I go into the resources for learning, right, we get back into, see the social emotional learning hub? It's a major part of what's going on here. And so the message that they've put out there is, this is the why, the who, the when, the how. It's become a part of their narrative. They've made it a dominant part of their narrative. One of the first things that we check in with students, the students put an icon in on how they're feeling, right? Even before they come into class and continue through class. And they're doing online learning or a hybrid version. And so I would...
Sorry, what is their method of doing that?
So they use Elite Online Classroom, and they have, I think now they've even been able to do it on Google Classroom. They use what's called Ruler. It's just one of the tools. Have you seen Ruler?
No.
Let me show you
Is that
one.
the social stuff?
Yeah, it's, gosh, Ruler, SEL. If I go to images, yeah, here it is. You can see it's rainbow colors. It's kind of hard to miss it. Here we go.
Is that the
This
one
is
through
Ruler.
Harvard or Yale? It's through Yale, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm using
yep.
something like that right now. Yeah.
Right. What's his name? Mark
Greenberg?
I'm going to remember it immediately when we're done with this. But he's been working with them, and I've actually been working with him and aligning it to a lot of the self-navigation tools. Now, mind you, I'm not all about Ruler or Mood Meter. I don't care which one we use. I really appreciate, though, this commitment to making social emotional awareness and ability to communicate around it a major part of my lesson. That's what I'm all in on. And I will customize my stuff to whoever you choose to work with or do. I just happen to have been doing this for them. And so they're using their ruler and their mood meters with the kids. And so the kids pick which box they're on and then they log on and that's what shows up.
Oh, interesting.
So
That's, I think, one of the barriers that I've kind of struggled with is because we have, sorry, I'm going to go on a 20-second tangent here.
go for it.
But we have like a year 1 through 6 lessons, right, that I'm trying to plan out and working with some other people. We're using this mood meter and starting to introduce this to kids. But if it was in the classroom and the kids come in, it's so easy to have them circle something or go to the board or do something like that. But then once you add the whole component of having to do technology with it, I mean, it complicates it because then you have like a 5 or 6-year-old that is trying to figure something out, and then 10, 11, 12-year-olds as well. And so that whole range is like, it's requiring so much time and effort to like try and find something that works for that it's almost like I can use my time better to just do something else instead of having to go down that path, if that makes
It's entirely possible. I know in the younger ones, so they have preschool reception and then year 1, and they do one of the surveys. So there's a survey that pops up and it just has red, yellow, blue, or green. And so the kids, it's not that they're going into the actual words and language here, but with those little ones, it's just the color. And they knew enough about what the color meant that they were identifying what their mood was. And so that helped the teacher just kind of start it off. So maybe it could start just as simple as that.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if Lee has something like this in the works, Tracy, because
Yeah, I'm making a note to touch base with her and ask, actually.
Yeah, these categories are very similar to the search framework from Lee. And certainly many researchers are working on these kinds of things. So, but yeah, kind of going to what you shared, Marie, for you, Nick, yeah, that kind of makes sense that for the littlest ones, it's really a generalized association, even with a color, is the most appropriate kind of way to gauge, whereas it can become more linguistically associated, as they get older. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see if Lee's got something similar.
Sure, he does.
Or we could kind of co-develop something with her, Nick, based on the search framework that would kind of further embed that framework, but serve this purpose that you're talking about, which is so important, right? Is kind of
but the dominant
right now. So we're embedding zones of regulation into every classroom with these well-being lessons, and using the colors, or the whole idea of colors associated with feelings and energy levels and things like that. It's apparent. I mean, I'm actually not teaching the lessons. I've created them for the rest of the student services to give to those times, but apparently it's going really well and the kids are into it. So I don't know. I mean, it's a long process, but I'm looking forward to working with Lee as well and developing something.
Is there any opportunity to help share that methodology with the parents so that they can follow up with it at home, especially if we're doing distance learning, offsite learning as a natural part of, hey kids, so where are you with your energy, or where are you with your your feelings? And to just letting parents know that's a natural part of the class. So go ahead and ask them that, which would encourage communication at home.
Well, both parents and teachers, because if teachers aren't using it and using the same language, then, I mean, parents, I don't know, they're two different things as well, two different paths to go down. So
even those of us who are both will have to admit it's always two different hats. But the idea of what I liked about what that district was able to do was to make social emotional learning front and center and message it on their website. I would encourage you to do that and own that, especially as this unpredictability happens. If our primary goal is to make sure that our students are safe first, then that has to be a part of a dominant conversation, and certainly not an afterthought, not something I'll add on to it after an academic conversation, because what we've learned is academics follow social emotional health. And so if you don't have what you're doing in place first, then you and I can rail against academic performance till the cows come home. We're not going to see that kind of improvement.